Well, welcome to the Wichita Sedgwick County Historical Museum and our afternoon of celebrating International Guitar Month. And we have two really great presenters today who've come to Wichita just to present this program. We are going to record it and post it online for future reference too. So I just welcome you to the museum, and we do programs like this occasionally, but this one's very special because today we have Derrick Doty and Deke Dickerson, both presenting for each of them about an hour. So Deke will start at about 3 after a brief intermission, and I'll begin by... Did I introduce myself? I'm Eric Kale. I'm the museum director. And, oh, no applause here, but thank you. And I am delighted to have guitar such a feature of our local history because it's a favorite thing of mine, guitars and guitar music and history. So it's been really fun to put these together. And here today, Derrick Doty has come from, you all know where Manhattan, Kansas is, up in that area. Derrick is a musicologist, a performer, a historian, a member of the Morris County Historical Society, and a board member of the Historic Preservation Corporation. He has devoted many years and excellent research and also devoted a lot of time to presenting. He's a great presenter, and you're in for a treat. Kansas music history today with an emphasis on the guitar. So Derrick, well, now it's time for applause. Derrick Doty.
Okay, who was here last month for the music history talk? Yay! This will be I might mention a few things in here from last month, but mostly I wanted to focus on guitar in Kansas. So I threw this thing together from scratch and then realized, oh my, I've got so much information on guitars, I had to start cutting things out. So I'm going to try to keep it under an hour. We'll see how we do here. I'm a fiddler. I tell people I'm a fiddler. That's what I do. I tell people I'm not really a guitarist, but I play it by default because sometimes I have to. So this will be a challenge today to show you a few interesting things on the guitar. Well, to start off with, guitar, this is the guitar edition of Kansas Music History. These fellas here, any guess where this might be taken? Wild guesses? Not here. In Kansas, yes. You might notice, I think these might be sergeant stripes on his trousers there. This is Fort Riley. These are men in the barracks relaxing. 1909 is when it was taken. They've got their guitars and their mandolins. This was right at the, right in the middle of the mandolin craze where everybody was doing these mandolin and banjo clubs. And so we can only guess what they were playing at that time. Is this going to work for me? Okay. So this is something I usually share with my humanities talks, is about the first musicians to come to Kansas. Because music, it's an integral part of our lives, it's an integral part of our history as a state, and it was here at the very beginning, and it played a very important role in forming Kansas as we know it. Forrest and Joseph Savage, actually I've got their names backward. Joseph is over there on your far left. They were from Hartford, Vermont. They were in the city brass band there with a couple of their cousins. And in 1854, I think it was August of that year, what was going on? Why were people wanting to come to Kansas then? Yeah, that's nobody has given me that answer, but yes, that's pretty much the answer. Popular sovereignty. The territory had just opened up for settlement, and so there were a bunch of New Englanders who wanted to come to Kansas to help establish it as a free state in the Union and to end the spread of slavery at Missouri. And so that's what these two brothers did. They show up on the train platform in Boston one morning getting ready to go. They have their brass instruments in hand. And as the story goes, there's a fella, you might recognize his name, John Greenleaf Whittier. Anybody know him? "Shoot if you must this old gray head, but spare your country's flag," she said. His famous Civil War poem of Barbara Fritchie. Anyway, he had just written a poem about this occasion, about people coming to Kansas. He called it The Kansas Immigrant. And a famous American composer at that time, Marion Dix Sullivan, had just put his lyrics to music and published it as a song. And you can look this up on the Library of Congress website. You can find her music. You can play it on your piano. You can hear what it sounds like. I don't think it's very interesting. And I don't think anybody else thought it was very interesting because they quickly dropped that melody or maybe never even took it up. But what they did figure out early on is that the meter of Whittier's verse fits this popular traditional Scottish song that everybody knows. And so they started singing it to that. So the brass band on the platform pulled out their horns and they start playing Auld Lang Syne, while all the people there with their little pamphlet in hand with the lyrics on it, they start singing. "We cross the prairies as of old the pilgrims cross the sea, to make the West as they the East the homestead of the free. We go to raise a wall of men on freedom's southern line, and plant beside the cotton tree the rugged northern pine." And so this became their anthem. Thank you. I don't usually sing a cappella, but that's the one exception. This became their anthem as they traveled by steamship and rail all across the country to come to Kansas. And everywhere they stopped along the way, the band would play music. The immigrants would sing this song of Whittier's, except until they made it to St. Louis. And Missouri did not appreciate these sentiments, so they kept quiet about that. But once they got into Kansas territory, they took up their song again, and they took up their instruments. And so the Savage Brothers, and then with the addition of a few other New Englanders, when they arrived in Lawrence, Kansas, became the first band of Kansas. And they were known as the Lawrence Cornet Band. And there's quite a lot of other interesting information regarding those individuals. You probably know what happened in Lawrence in 1863 with a fella named Quantrill. Well, Joseph survived that. His horn didn't fare so well, but he had to send it to a manufacturer back east that refurbished it and returned it to him. And the following year, in 1864, finds him and his horn and the brass band with the Lawrence militia at Westport as they're fighting off Sterling Price. So his horn saw a lot of history. It was very important to him. It was something that he valued a lot. And my question is, where is that horn today? I've not been able to track it down. So thinking about early music in Kansas, we've got a few images here of early musicians. I like this one. This is way down south in Kansas, almost to the Oklahoma border, near Protection. This is the Turkey Track Ranch, and presumably they're ranch hands, and they must be entertaining themselves, or maybe they're getting ready to play for a dance. We're not sure. But we've got the cello here, an instrument that you might not associate with the prairie, but we find that cellos, or as they were called, bass viols or bass violins, were here in Kansas, including Lawrence. They had one there in the 1850s. But this was the instrument that provided your bass in your band, so they were sometimes just referred to as the bass. You'll notice on this one it's only got 3 strings instead of 4, and that's not unusual to see in old images of cellos. There's always a string missing. It's never the same one. And people wonder, well, what is this about? Why are they only playing with 3 strings? Well, it's probably because if you broke a string, you couldn't go to the hardware store and get one. You'd have to order it, you'd have to wait a while, and they were expensive because that's a lot of gut. And so they probably just played without as long as they could. We got the guy in the long coat there in the middle. He's playing a harmonica, so he's probably the lead instrument. And then there's our guitar. Our guitar has probably been in Kansas for a very long time. You're going to see more of it. You're going to see so much guitar today, you'll never want to see it again. This is way out west in Kansas, almost to the Colorado border. These are a group of Swedish immigrants. And I really like this image because we've got a good mixture of instrumentation. We've got the fiddlers. We can see their grip. Not all musicians are in the playing stance when they are photographed, but these guys are. So we can see their bow grip. We can see how they're holding their instruments. That's all good information. But the guitars here is what stands out. You don't usually see this many guitars in this period, before 1900 and such. Today, if you go to a jam session in Kansas, about anywhere in the state, the guitars are going to outnumber all the other instruments because everybody plays guitar. It's a popular instrument. It has been for a long time. And it's fairly easy to play, and people like to use it to accompany themselves as they're singing. But I don't think that's the reason why we have 3 guitars here. At this period, you'll notice these guitars are a little smaller. These are parlor instruments. And if you want to see one up close, the museum has one here on display, I think upstairs. You got 3 parlor guitars? 3rd floor. It's on the 3rd floor. Really nice. I think it's a Martin parlor guitar. You see how small the body is. They were strung with gut strings or silk that was spun and then wrapped with silver wire. Those were very quiet instruments. They didn't have a lot of volume to them. And they're also playing with their bare fingers, which doesn't help. If you're using a plectrum, you get a little more volume out of it. So I imagine there's so many guitars here because they needed the volume to back up the violins, because even with gut strings, violins are still pretty loud. Okay, I want to share with you about a famous Kansan. Maybe you've heard of Henry Worrell before. If you haven't heard of him, you've likely seen his artwork. He is best known as an illustrator, and a lot of his images are still circulating today. Last fall, I played at a winery north of Lawrence where they have a wine called Drouthy, Kansas, and it has Henry Worrell's image of Drouthy, Kansas that he did, I think, in the 1870s. That's their label for the bottle. So his illustrations are still widely circulated. And that's mostly what he's known for from his time in Topeka. He was born in England. He came to America as a child. In 1868 or 9, he moved to Topeka, Kansas, and spent the rest of his life there, working as an artist. But he was also a guitarist, and he was a pretty talented guitarist. And he performed, he wrote music. As early as the 1850s, he was composing and publishing music, some of which is still played today. He taught at the Ohio Women's College and taught them how to play guitar. So Henry's kind of an important fellow when it comes to guitar history and how he influences other traditions. So I'm going to play for you real quick, or maybe not real quick, a selection of his. In 1862, he published Worrell's Guitar School, I think is what he called it. But it was his method for teaching the guitar. Called Worrell's Waltz, and it will give you a little example of how the guitar was played in the 1850s and 60s. we'll do another number here in a bit. But first, I want to show you some of Henry's artwork. Maybe you've seen this image before. This was published in 1874 in Joseph McCoy's History of the Cattle Trade. And Joseph McCoy gives a wonderful description of dance houses in the West at that time. He didn't specifically say it was Abilene or Wichita or Junction City or Ellsworth or any of those places. It could have been any or all of them. But his description is not a very nice one. He pretty much says that the lowest of the low lives attended these dance houses, and that, you know, the kind of people that if they did not exist, the planet would be a better place, is pretty much what he said. Well, looking at Henry's illustration of it, I wouldn't gather that from the picture, although if you look close, there is one spurred boot that's up about eye level, so things are getting a little rowdy there. But what I love about Henry, since he was a musician, I think he took care to add things that maybe other artists would overlook. Note the musicians up in the corner, elevated and playing for the dance. We've got the cello again. We've got two fiddlers, which would not be uncommon. If you had a dance, maybe you would only have one fiddle playing. If you're lucky, you'd have two. One would be playing the rhythm or the seconding. And it's interesting that the fiddler in the middle has his mouth open as though he is calling out the figures of the dance as the dancers are dancing. So I like those little details. Here's an image of Henry and his wife Mary in their home shortly before the turn of the century. She played as well. One of the really interesting things that I want to share with you about Henry's guitar playing is he didn't always use this standard guitar tuning. He would use what we call today as open tunings, like D tuning or G tuning. And he was doing this as early as the 1850s and composing pieces that were written as though you played the guitar normally, but it's tuned differently. And so this was kind of an easy way to learn to play the guitar or to play a beautiful piece. And I'm not sure that Henry thought of this idea. People have been using alternate tunings for hundreds of years with the guitar and all kinds of instruments. But this had an influence later on when we get to black music traditions, Delta blues guitar. And they start using these open tunings, and they refer to them as, for instance, one of them is vastable or bastable tuning, and that is a corruption of Henry's composition, The Siege of Sebastopol. Or they might use fandango tuning, which comes from Henry's composition, Violet Waltz, which ends up becoming in the banjo traditions, Spanish fandango, but it's the same thing. So they're using Henry's tunings and using those names that he associated with those pieces. So I'd like to now give you a little sampling of one of these open tunings. I suspect later on we're going to hear a little bit about Hawaiian guitar, I hope. And it's my understanding that in those traditions they called it slack key tuning. I'm not sure if we referred to that as slack key at this time or not. I do sometimes. But this is a little excerpt of Worrell's Siege of Sebastopol, which was a very popular piece that he published, I think, in the 1850s. And I'm just going to play some excerpts of it. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but if you want to hear the entire piece, you can look it up on YouTube. There's plenty of talented guitarists who have recorded this and can do much better than I can. since we're here talking about guitars, I should probably tell you about this guitar, because that's the last I'm going to use it for. There's nothing special about this guitar as far as value goes. It was the cheapest guitar that Regal probably made at that time, with cheap materials. But it's special in the fact that it's my grandfather's first guitar that he had. But this is the Oahu model made by Regal in Chicago from 1930 to 1935. And you can still find these today. They're made with, this is faux painted rosewood. It's probably birch or some cheap wood that's been painted to look like expensive wood. When I found this, it was in our attic, and so it's got cracks in the back. It's kind of worn out and beat up, but that's okay. I like it. And it used to have kind of a florally, Hawaiian theme painted on the top, and that's all worn away. And then this fancy-looking fingerboard, most people today lovingly refer to this as mother of toilet seat. It's just plastic. Okay, moving on from Henry. I usually like to include African American musicians in my talks because their traditions and their stories often go overlooked. And in fact, we don't know a lot about them. We don't know as much as we would like to know about the music. Like this image here, we think it's taken around Lawrence, Kansas. It comes from a Lawrence studio, but we don't know who these people are. But we've got a wonderful arrangement of instruments here with 5-string banjo and early 20th century guitars. Marshall County Fair, 1929. This is an interesting period. There's some transitions happening here with instruments. The tenor banjo is becoming more popular at this time than the 5-string, although this is a 5-string banjo here. But I want you to look at the guitar here. It's not a 6-string guitar. It's a 4-string guitar, so this is a tenor guitar. They were also becoming pretty popular at this period. And then eBay is where I sometimes find information, sometimes good information, sometimes not so good. But this was from a panoramic photograph of some social event in the early 20th century, they thought around the Kansas City area. And of course the musicians catch my attention. We've got the double bass, we've got the mandolin, and the harp guitar. And we're going to talk about the harp guitar. But this would have been in the era of the mandolin orchestra and mandolin band music. Here's another eBay find from several years ago. This is from a photographer at Oberlin, Kansas, I believe. I can't see the writing there, but he photographed in a number of communities in that region. This is an interesting picture. People like these, they collect them, but it's what's on the back of this image that really captured my attention. It was the lyrics for a song called The Little Sod Shanty on the Claim. And maybe you've never heard of it, but you're going to hear it. In 1871, a fellow by the name of William Shakespeare Hayes wrote The Little Log Cabin in the Lane. And this is a song that has come up today in bluegrass traditions. We still sing it. The lyrics have changed over time. It was originally written as a minstrel song, so it was from the viewpoint of an enslaved person thinking back on their log cabin, and Master and Miss are laying side by side, buried there by the cabin. It is now sung from the perspective of a young man who leaves home, goes to the city to make it big, and he thinks about his parents back home in the log cabin. Well, somewhere early on here, at least in the 1880s, somebody parodied this. Is that a word? Parodied? And made it the Sod Shanty on the Claim. And it has some origins with Kansas. Alan Lomax collected it from a guy in West Virginia who claimed that he wrote it in 1888 after his brother had spent a few years living in Kansas. So it was supposed to be a reflection of his experiences in the plains. But anyway, without further ado, I want to sing this for you. The version that is on the back of this image is unlike any other published version I've seen, so I really enjoy getting to share it with people. And we'll do this one on the banjo. I'm looking rather seedy now while holding down my claim, and my victuals are not always served Okay, we talk about guitar in Kansas and instruments, musicians. Let's talk about the makers of those instruments. Albert Shute, he was, I believe, born in Pennsylvania, but came to Kansas as a child, settled in Topeka, and that's where he spent the rest of his life. But right around the turn of the century, Albert is making instruments. He's making guitars and mandolins and banjos and whatnot, and apparently doing pretty well at it. Here's a picture of Albert in his Schute's Banjo Band, about 1930. All of the tenor banjos that you see there were made by Albert. And that has me thinking, that's a pretty good way to outfit a band. Here's one of Albert's guitars that he made. This is in the collection of the Kansas State Historical Museum. They've also got a few other of his instruments, a mandolin, which is basically the same shape, it's just smaller and has 8 strings. And some tenor banjos, I believe, mandolin banjos as well. And here's an instrument you've probably never seen before or heard of, the Mando bass harp guitar. This was Schute's invention sometime in the early part of the century. This was during the era of that Mando craze, the mandolin bands, and they needed these harp guitars and mandocellos and basses to help fill out the bottom end of the orchestra. So this was Albert's solution to that. It's got the guitar neck, and then it's got the mando bass neck, which is tuned like a regular upright bass would be, and fretted. And then you've got the additional sub-bass harp strings there. Now, I don't know how many of these Albert made. I'm guessing probably not very many. There's none known to exist today. But we know he made at least one, because here he is playing it with apparently a Hawaiian group of ladies. And I want to point out, I'm afraid I'm not going to talk about June Frisbee today. I talked about her last time I was here, but this lady in the back with the ukulele really looks familiar. And she really looks like June Frisbee, who came here to Wichita and opened up a music academy in 1922. And operated that until 1966 when she finally retired. But I've not been able to confirm yet, other than there's an 1890s newspaper, I think it's 90s, it could be right before 1920, that mentions Albert's Stringolio Band. He had a number of iterations of bands that he played in. But Stringolio performed somewhere in Topeka, and it lists the musicians, and it lists Mrs. June Frisbee as the ukulele player. So I don't know if this could be her mother or June herself. We have yet to see. So the mandolin craze. Guitars were an important part of that, giving the rhythm and the bass. Every city, you can imagine, had a guitar club, mandolin club at some point in its existence, no matter how small they were. This is the Lawrence City Club, and you'll notice there's some violins in there too, not just mandolins. Wichita had at least 6 mandolin clubs that I'm aware of. There was one that was called the Silver Strings. There was the Crescent Club. There was the Waco Club, which I bet they were on Waco Street. And then I just learned about the one, the Grasshopper Club. They were here in Wichita, named after the grasshopper plague that happened. And if your city didn't have a mandolin club, your college certainly did. Here's a couple of gentlemen from the KU Mandolin Club, which started in the mid-1890s, and it was kind of their tradition annually to tour the state. And so they came here to Wichita to tour and to perform. The Glee Club, Banjo and Mandolin Club performed and toured the state doing that. Here's a few more Lawrence musicians. I bet they might belong to the college club, but we don't know for sure. And this is an interesting photo because it's showing us this change in instrumentation, or makers as far as that goes. We've got the F model mandolin in the back. These are all Gibson instruments. And we've got the A model Gibson. And we've got the Style U harp guitar, which we're going to take a look at here in a moment. And then there's this mandolin that's up front on the floor. I think that's actually a mandola. It looks like it's big enough to be a mandola. So that's pretty cool. Let me talk about the harp guitar for a little bit. I brought one. This is a Gibson Style U. This is about 1916 or 1917. Gibson started making harp guitars in 1902. The early ones were massive. They were just really big, had a great big sound hole. But there's something really cool about the harp guitar. You know, it's not a new idea. They've been making harp guitars for hundreds of years because guys always want these lower notes. They want this low bass sound on their guitar. So Gibson started developing these during this mandolin club craze to fill that need. And let's just give it a sample here. They typically were not played with a pick. They would have been played finger style like all other guitars. But I want to demonstrate something for you here. See what you think of this. I'm just going to play a chord. The harp part is still resonating with this sympathetic vibration. Doesn't that sound kind of electric? Yeah, the idea of electric instruments isn't new. Even in the 1890s, they were Fairbanks and Cole were making banjos that were the electric model. And it was this idea that, electric is something new and fancy and it's loud. And I can't help but think that this is like an electric guitar. This is what they were wanting to work towards eventually. But anyway, these were usually played with bare fingers. As you can see, it's a challenge to play these because this is a 10-string bass model. You've got such a wide range here that you have to span your hand. So they're not real practical and easy to play, but they sure look good. I'll give you a little sampling here. I don't know how this is going to work out, but give you a little sampling of some popular music during this mandolin craze era. I usually play this with my mandolinist so he can fill in the extra parts, but this is an Irving Berlin number from 1920. And believe it or not, this is a tune that I grew up with when I was little, listening to it on the phonograph. And I just always thought this was a great song. Let's see what you think of it. Listen to me, honey dear, something's wrong with you, I fear. It's getting harder to please you, harder and harder each year. I don't want to make you blue, but you need a talking to. Like a lot of people I know, here's what's wrong with you. After you get what you want, you don't want it. If I gave you the moon, you'd grow tired of it soon. You're like a baby, you want what you want when you want it. But after you are presented with what you want, you're discontented. You're always wishing and wanting for something. When you get what you want, you don't want what you get. And though you sit upon my knee, you'll grow tired of me. 'Cause after you get what you want, you don't want what you wanted at all. Don't you say that I'm unkind. Think it over and you'll find you've got a changeable nature. You're always changing your mind. There's a longing in your eyes that is hard to satisfy. You're unhappy most of the time. Here's the reason why. After you get what you want, you don't want it. If I I gave you the moon, you'd grow tired of it soon. You're like a baby, you want what you want when you want it. But after you are presented with what you want, you're discontented. You're always wishing and wanting for something. When you get what you want, you don't want what you get. And though you sit upon my knee, you'll grow tired of me. 'Cause after you get what you want, you don't want what you wanted at all. Thank you. Well, I'm glad we made it through that. Get a little drink here, and then I'm going to tell you about, here's some other harp guitars. This is an earlier harp guitar before Gibson. The whole family lived in southwest Butler County before the turn of the century, and they had been bitten by the mandolin bug, and they really got into this music of the era, you know, jazz, ragtime, and waltzes, marches, whatnot. Myron, the oldest brother here on the left, he had saved up some money to purchase a guitar and a mandolin for his sisters, Hazel and Fern here. Now, it's interesting, they referred to the guitar as a double bass guitar. They didn't call it a harp guitar, but a double bass guitar. And here's the whole family again with their neighbors. They've got some different model guitars here, and I've completely blanked on what model this is called. Maybe somebody here knows. I want to say like Dyer, but it's not coming to me. But this would have been the more familiar guitar that you would have seen at that period from like the 1860s on up. And you can still buy them like this today. This is a recent photograph I came across. The Bijou Club at St. Anne's Academy at St. Paul, Kansas. This is down in southeast Kansas. This was a Catholic mission, and this picture is right before 1895. We've got these parlor guitars in here, the mandolins, violins. There's a couple of German zithers, and there's one banjo hiding in here. There's some bells. There's like some parlor bells or something, and a euphonium. I just found this interesting that the Catholic mission had a little mandolin club. Up in my neck of the woods, Junction City had a high school club, 1906. The guy playing the harp guitar here, this is the earlier model harp guitar from this one, Gibson made. And it's got the saddle is actually fastened to the top, and then it has a little metal strap to kind of help keep it there, apparently. And these are all Gibson instruments, A models and an F model on the end there. Here they are again a few years later. They've got a different guitar now. He must have realized this ain't worth the trouble. This is heavy and too big to play. Okay, now here's some cool stuff. Fisher's Gibson Orchestra of El Dorado, Kansas. This is probably taken about 1927 or so. There's a lot of cool things in here to look at. All Gibson instruments. There's tenor banjos. There's mandocellos. There's mandolas, there's A and F model mandolins, there's L model guitars, O model guitars, and I think there's even a mando banjo in there. But what is really fascinating is there are two Lloyd Loar signed F model mandolins in this image. And one of them belongs to Virgil Bisagno. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. But Virgil was just a young man when he purchased his instrument new for Fisher's Gibson Orchestra in 1924. And this was made, I forget, like January or February of that year. He didn't play it very long. He got married young, and I guess that's the end of music once you get married. That's not the case, is it? Not with us. So his instrument went under the bed, and his widow found it many, many years later and pulled it out, and long story short, it found a new owner. And that owner is Chris Thiele, whom you may know from the Punch Brothers and Nickel Creek. And so his I don't know how many $100,000 mandolin he's got now, started out in El Dorado, Kansas, played by this young man in the Mando Orchestra. And of course, I always wonder, why can't I find deals like that? We're going to move into radio for a little bit here. Check my time. KFKB Radio at Milford, Kansas. It has quite a story. Dr. John Brinkley started that up to promote his operations as a goat gland doctor, as he was called, the quack doctor. Ran for governor in 1930. But he had this radio station at Milford, and this is one of the dance bands that played on the radio station. I'll have you note there is a tenor guitar over there. I think it's a Gibson. I can't really make it out well, but it looks like it probably says Gibson. And then this is Bob Larkin and his Arkansans. Bob Larkin is the fiddler on your left. He was from Arkansas originally, but he moved to Kansas and his family, and they lived there while they were working at Milford. His son is standing behind him. He was the pianist, played for him. And we've got two Gibson L model guitars there, and I believe those are Gibson banjos, tenor banjos as well. Here is Bob Larkin. I like to share about Bob Larkin because he's one of the few, even though he's not technically a Kansas fiddler, he's one of the few fiddlers that has been in Kansas that we have recordings of. Most of our fiddlers, we don't have any recordings of them because on those early radio shows, it was all live broadcast. And so it's been real frustrating for me to try and find any recordings of them. But we've got Bob Larkin. And so that is the Kansas City reel that he's playing there. Bob Larkin won a number of contests. In fact, there was one guy that grumbled about him winning a contest. He said, well, the only reason he won that is because I couldn't be there to beat him. And so Larkin drove to his location and beat him anyway. Here's another performer from KFKB Radio, Roy Faulkner, known as the Lonesome Cowboy. He was just a young guy when he started there at Milford, and ended up pretty much performing for the rest of his life. He settled in Topeka, and that's where he remained till his death. The historical museum up there does have some of his things on display, like the musical saw that he played. I think they've got his harmonica and maybe like a shirt or something. This is another one of the cool story about Roy. Again, early radio. There's no known recordings of him. I have not found anything until a few months ago. Somebody contacted me, and they said, I've got recordings of Roy Faulkner. I'm like, oh, really? I'm interested. Well, it turns out this guy is like his dad's mother or grandmother was like married to Roy Faulkner. So Roy, like probably in the 70s, I'm guessing is when these recordings were made, he would sit down and he'd record and mail these to the family so they could listen to him. I've now got over 3 hours of Roy Faulkner singing cowboy songs, some of which I've never heard before. And we can hear his guitar style very clearly. So I'm hoping that these guys will work a little better to get these divided up by song and make them accessible for the public to listen to. But pretty cool. Something that doesn't happen very often. Wendell Hall is a name that you may not recognize, but I know that you know a tune that he wrote and published in 1923 that became wildly popular. He sold like 2 million copies of it. But Wendell Hall was born in Kansas at St. George, which is just down the river from me. And he's buried just up the hill from me in Manhattan. So I can wander up there about any time and pay him a visit. But he didn't stay long in Kansas. His family moved to Chicago, and that's where he got started with his career in music. And he got into vaudeville. He was a xylophonist. And he could play with 4 mallets, and he could sing while he played. And so he's on the vaudeville circuit, traveling with his xylophone, which, as you can imagine, such a big, heavy instrument is eating into his income, having to ship that by rail. But he's doing very well, and he starts writing his own material, because he quickly finds out that, sometimes the act before him sings some numbers that he was going to do. So he says, well, if I write my own material, they won't have it. And so now he's doing really well, pushing his own music and selling it in music stores. Until he gets into a fight and punches his manager in the nose for getting fresh with a girl that he liked. And so that blackballed him from vaudeville. He was done. He goes back to Chicago, he forms a little trio, and they just perform locally around town and do very well. But right about that time, something big was happening in the country and Chicago. Radio was coming in. And so he walks into this music shop and somebody says, hey, you ever heard radio? That's radio over there. You go give that a listen. So he puts on these headsets and listens to it. And he thinks, if I can sell my music behind a counter, I wonder how many more people I can reach through radio. So he gets right into it and becomes a wild success. He's just as natural behind a microphone as he is on stage. And everybody loves him. Of course, he gets tired of hauling this great big instrument back and forth from his house to the studio, so he decides to get something easier to transport. The ukulele. The ukulele's been around a while, and he had played it for a while too, but now this would become the instrument that Wendell Hall was most known for. And in fact, this is a Wendell Hall redhead ukulele, manufactured by Regal in 1925. And you can find quite a few of these around. But we're gonna try a little sing-along here. You know that song I said that you probably know? We're going to sing it. It's called It Ain't Gonna Rain No More. And the words might be slightly different in the way you know it, but I think you'll catch on. Was dark and dreary, the air was full of sleet. The old man stood out in the storm with his shoes all full of feet. Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. How in the world can the old folks tell? It ain't gonna rain no more. Oh, mosquito, he fly high. Mosquito, he fly low. If old man Skeeter ever lights on me, he ain't gonna fly no more. Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. How in the world can the old folks tell? It ain't gonna rain no more. Oh, little black and white animal out in the woods, I says, isn't that little cat pretty? I went over to pick it up. It wasn't that kind of a kitty. Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. How in the world can the old folks tell? It ain't gonna rain no more. Here's a verse about a man and a trombone. The words to it are few. He blew, he blew, he blew, he blew. He blew, he blew, he blew. Oh, it ain't gonna rain no more, no more. It ain't gonna rain no more. How in the world can the old folks tell? It ain't gonna rain no more. Thank you. The ukulele. So another Kansan I like to share about is Carson Robison. He was born down in southeast Kansas, and he had quite an influence on the nation as far as music goes. He got his start, his father was said to be an expert fiddler, so they were a musical family, and he played other instruments, but mostly we see him on the guitar. But he got his start up in Kansas City, Missouri at the Mulebach Hotel, and he played with the Coon Sanders Nighthawk Orchestra, the Enemies of Sleep. And while he's up there, he meets somebody, Wendell Hall, who's touring the nation on a radio tour. And Wendell maybe wasn't quite so impressed with Robison's singing or guitar playing, or that beautiful O model Gibson guitar there. But he was impressed with Robison's whistling. He had this unique ability to warble like a bird. And so Hall paid for Robison's train fare to New York City, where they recorded in 1924 4 sides. And one of those recordings was Whistling the Blues Away. And I'm going to let you hear it because it's unique. It features Robison's whistling, which he would later get the moniker of the Kansas Jaybird for. And Wendell Hall's not playing the ukulele on this. He's singing, and he's playing the slide whistle. And they do a little duet.
When the weary blues come stealing round and all your dreams come tumbling down, don't think that life is all in vain. You'll find a frown won't get you anything, but no one knows what smiles will bring when sunshine flies away the rain. Just cause the skies are drear, don't start to sigh. The sunshine's ever near, and you will find it by and by. So pucker up and whistle a tune, and you'll be finding very soon you're whistling those blues away.
That was, no, that was Paul played the tiple, spelled tipple, so most people pronounce it wrong. It's a tiple, and there's also a taro patch, and I'm not sure which one was which right now. It's one of those two. So I don't think any 2 other guys could have pulled off a duet quite like that one, but it worked. During most of the 1920s, the late 20s, Robison worked with Vernon Dalhart, and they recorded extensively, a lot of folk songs, mountain ballads, sentimental pieces, also original numbers. And Dalhart and Robison are considered by many people today to be the fathers of country music. So I think that's pretty cool. After he left Dalhart, though, he ends up teaming up with a couple of other Kansas brothers, Frank and Phil Luther. Their actual family name was Crow, but that didn't go in the show business apparently, so they went by Luther. And then Frank Luther, he ends up going on to marry a talented violinist from Hutchinson, Kansas, named Zora Lehman. And they recorded together quite a bit in the 40s and 50s, I think, and you can listen to them today. Later on in the 30s, I think the Buckaroos is probably what Robison would be the best known for. He created his own group, Cowboy Singers, and Pearl Pickens, who we see here, is another Kansan from Lebo, Kansas. She went to Juilliard, became a trained vocalist, and ends up singing in Robison's Buckaroos. I do want to share one Robison song. He recorded this with Dalhart in the 20s, and then he recorded it again later with the Buckaroos in the 30s. It's called Way Out West in Kansas. There's a place where the birds sing bass, the rabbits laugh, and the bulldogs face. Train don't stop in my hometown, 'cause the woodpeckers knocked the depot down. Where the girls grow tall and thin, the boys grow whiskers on their chin. Their ears grow out and their toes grow in, out in that western town. Now folks don't stay out very late, way out west in Kansas. They take the sidewalks in at 8, way out west in Kansas. just turned 17, way out west in Kansas. But she's so old, she's muscle bound. The folks all say she built the town. She's got the 17 turned around, way out west in Kansas. An old man stopped to take a rest, way out west in Kansas. He sat right down in a hornet's nest, way out west in Kansas. The hornets quickly took offense, left their trademark on his pants. He's been standing ever since, way out west in Kansas. Thank you. And for the sake of more guitar history, I should mention this guitar was made in Kansas, not too far away, just north of El Dorado, outside of Burns, Kansas. This was my wife's wedding present from her father. So it's about 15 years old now, 16 years old. And it's made out of curly babinga with a spruce top. It's a Martin style triple O. So these, I think the triple O started coming out in about the 30s or so. So we have this bigger body, more sound. That's what we always want, more volume from the guitar.
And what's his name?
Rodney Kane. Rod Kane. He's made quite a few guitars, but he's been out of it for a little while now. Hey, I think that's it. That's all I got. I'm done. So, thank you.